The internet is an amazing invention. There seems to be an answer to questions that most rational people wouldn't ask. Like, is a Volkswagen GTI faster than a Subaru BRZ around a racetrack?
But it's out there now like some sort of backwards plot from Bizarro World. This portly front-wheel drive German luxury hatchback outpacing this sublimely well-balanced rear-wheel drive sports coupe.
Is it possible? Could it even happen? Well, there's only one way to find out.
That's right, it's time to generate a new answer for the insatiable appetite of the internet.
The BRZ and the GTI both make 200 horsepower. The Subaru does it with a 2-liter direct injection boxer engine, while Volkswagen uses a 2-liter turbocharged engine. There are two transmission choices for the BRZ, the 6-speed manual we have and an optional 6-speed automatic. With this 6-speed manual transmission, the BRZ is rated at 22 miles per gallon city and 30 on the highway. Our BRZ came in at $28,265 after destination, since this is the limited model.
As Mike already mentioned, the GTI is equipped with a 2-liter turbocharged engine, and although it's rated at 200 horsepower from the factory, we know from seeing them on the dyno that they actually make closer to that at the wheels. The GTI comes with two available transmissions, either a 6-speed manual or, like this car, the 6-speed DSG automatic.
Unlike the GTI, the BRZ looks the part of a proper sports car. It is a low-slung, 2-door coupe with classic proportions that just screams performance vehicle from a mile away. At just over 50 inches tall, the BRZ is over 7 inches shorter than the GTI and is actually shorter than a Nissan 370Z and a Porsche 911. The BRZ is full of LED lights. They are on the taillights, headlights, and daytime running lights. This particular model is the top-of-the-line limited model, which adds fog lights and a rear spoiler. It may not sound like much, but these subtle changes do add to the overall look of the BRZ.
Where the BRZ is that low-slung, sexy sports coupe shape, the GTI is much more of a classic hatchback, but it does have some extra aggression with those big 18-inch wheels and those LED headlights. The Tornado red paint really does pop, and that GTI badge has a lot of hot hatch history.
Being the fully loaded version of the BRZ, this vehicle has upgrades like heated seats, leather seats, automatic climate control, push-button start, no key entry, and heated mirrors. Now, these changes aren't quite enough to make it as premium as the GTI, but it does close the gap a little bit. The two areas where the BRZ can compete with the GTI, though, are rear seat space and trunk space. With only 6.9 cubic feet in the trunk, it's pretty pathetic how much you can fit in there. But thankfully, the rear seats fold flat, and with less than 30 inches of rear leg room, the rear seats are completely useless. So just keep them folded flat and kind of open up that general back area and turn this into a proper 2-seat sports car.
I've never really been a big fan of the plaid seats they use in the GTI, but I have to admit that the rest of the interior is really much nicer than the BRZ. All of the materials are higher quality, and with 4 doors, it's actually a much more practical car. And overall, it's just in a very nice place to be. I'm not so sure why the shift knob looks like a golf ball, but I guess that has something to do with the name. I also really like that it's got an adjustable and telescoping armrest, and the steering wheel is beautiful too. It's got this nice flat bottom to it, and it's really well bolstered. The gauge cluster is also, I think, more modern looking than the BRZs, which to me just looks a little dated.
The BRZ comes with less tire and less weight than the GTI, but neither factor is as important as chassis balance. Forget for a second that the GTI is front-wheel drive and this is rear-wheel drive. There's been plenty of good handling front-wheel drive cars before, like the Integra Type R and the Ford Focus ST, and there's plenty of bad handling rear-wheel drive cars, like basically anything made before 1990. The BRZ is a great vehicle, street or track, to drive, and its willingness to do what you tell it to makes it the ideal weapon for someone who's not a professional. Now, the vehicle can get out of hand because it is set up so well to rotate through the corners, but if you catch it early enough, it's not that hard to get a hold of, especially if you've left on some of the stability controls or you put it in VSC Sport. As you can tell on a straightaway here, there isn't a whole lot of power. I mean, it's only 200 horsepower and it has virtually no torque. But that kind of helps this overall vehicle for someone who's learning to track drive, because it doesn't build so much speed that you're just holding on through a lot of these corners. My favorite aspects of the vehicle, though, have to be the steering, the shifter, and the pedal placement, which makes for really easy heel-toe downshifting.
I've got to admit the GTI really does have a sweetheart of an engine. This little 2-liter turbo, it's got to make something like 220, maybe even 230 horsepower. It's just way underrated. It's a rocket in a straight line. It also makes its torque really low down in the power band. I think it hits peak torque around 1700 RPM, and it makes it all the way up to 5000 RPM. It really does pull strongly in just about any gear. In the past, the Golf GTI has been getting a little bit heavy, a little bit too understeery for my liking, but I've got to admit that this generation really is surprisingly good at the limit. It doesn't have a lot of understeer. In fact, with a little bit of drop throttle technique or a little trail braking, it rotates really nicely and it gets through the corners with a lot more speed than I was expecting it to. For me, the brakes in the GTI are just so-so. There's a pretty long travel of the brake pedal, and as they get hot, they start to get a little soft and you just lose confidence in them. I never had any kind of massive brake fade issue, but I didn't want to push it that hard because to me it felt like the pedal was just getting longer and longer. I'm actually really impressed by the steering in the GTI. It's got a really nice light feel to it. It feels very positive and very direct. I'm getting some good feedback through the steering wheel too. So all in all, it's got a lot of the characteristics you want in a real driver's car. I think in a perfect world, maybe we would have had the 6-speed manual, but I have to admit that the DSG does upshift really quickly, and its downshifts are really quick too, and they're always right there on demand when you want them. I've got to be honest with you, I really wasn't expecting to like the GTI here at the racetrack. I've always known it's a really good street car, but I just thought it was going to be too heavy, brakes fading and understeering everywhere. But you know, I'm really impressed by this car. It's doing everything you want it to do around the racetrack, and it's a lot of fun to drive.
These two vehicles couldn't be any more different on their approach to performance, and it's most apparent around the track.
It's true, Mike. They really are very different. The GTI is just a rocket ship in a straight line compared to the BRZ, but the BRZ is much better under braking and just feels so light and willing to change directions in the corners.
So Dave, the internet's waiting. Which one won?
Well, I guess it's not going to be too surprising for you rear-wheel drive guys to hear this, but the BRZ was actually 2 seconds a lap faster than the GTI with a 1:26.8 versus the GTI's 1:28.8. I do understand the notion that the GTI is easier to drive at the limit though, where the BRZ really does take a lighter touch and maybe a little bit more skill to get the most out of it.